Hey guys, tonight we are diving head first, and probably nose first, into a world where the spin cycle was a strong arm and a prayer, and fresh scent meant it didn't actively smell of farm animal. We're journeying back to medieval times to uncover the surprisingly complex and frankly rather pungent story of how laundry was done with lye and a healthy dose of village gossip. Picture this. You're walking down a narrow, unpaved street. The air, thick with the aroma of wood smoke, damp earth, and something vaguely organic, clings to you like a second skin. Your woolen tunic, the one you've worn for, well, let's just say a while, is starting to feel less like clothing and more like a sentient, scratchy companion. Honestly, with the sheer effort involved and the somewhat hazardous materials, you probably wouldn't survive your first medieval wash day without at least a mild chemical burn or a thrown out back. It makes complaining about separating darks and lights seem a bit precious, doesn't it? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment letting us know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always fascinating to see how far these little historical drifts can travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step out of your small, timber-framed dwelling, the one you share with your family, and, depending on the season and your social standing, perhaps a few cherished livestock who are absolutely not house-trained. The floor beneath your worn leather shoes isn't exactly pristine. It might be packed earth or strewn with rushes that are supposed to absorb spills and general detritus, but after a while they mostly just become part of the detritus. It's a bit like that rug in a student house that's seen too much and knows all your secrets. You know the one, quietly judging your life choices. These rushes might be changed periodically, perhaps for important feasts or holy days, but periodically is a wonderfully vague medieval term. Outside, the air is an experience. If you're in a town, the narrow street is likely a slurry of mud, animal droppings, horses, pigs, chickens, dogs, all contributing to the rich, organic tapestry of the ground, and whatever slops have been casually tossed from windows above. Gardeloo might be a quaint historical cry, but it's less quaint when you're the one instinctively ducking the unseen contents of a chamber pot hurtling earthwards. There are no neat pavements, no underground sewage systems as we know them, just a central gutter, if you're lucky, a shallow depression valiantly trying its best to channel the muck somewhere, usually towards the nearest river. And that river? Well, we'll get to its crucial role in your impending laundry adventures later, but let's just say it's a very, very multi-purpose waterway, serving as drinking source, waste disposal, and, yes, your local launderette, all in one. The smells are layered, a medieval potpourri you didn't specifically request, but get to enjoy all the same. Wood smoke is a constant, of course, permeating everything, comforting in its way, a sign of hearth and home, but it's mingled with the less comforting sense of tanneries processing animal hides with vats of urine and lime, the acrid tang of blacksmiths sending up metallic, sooty plumes from their forges, butchers' shops with their raw, coppery, slightly sweet smell of blood and offal, and the general pervasive background aroma of unwashed bodies, stale food, and damp living. Perfumes and pomanders existed naturally, little balls of fragrant resins, spices and herbs, often carried in ornate little cages, but these were more like a brave, fragrant flag, flown in the face of an odorous hurricane than a genuine solution to the miasma. One quirky tidbit for you. Some people, particularly the well-to-do, carried strongly scented nosegays, small bouquets of flowers or potent herbs like rosemary and rue, to hold discreetly to their noses when navigating particularly fragrant areas of town. It was a sort of medieval Vicks Vapo Rub for the nostrils, a personal olfactive shield. Personal hygiene is, shall we say, approached differently than our modern, almost obsessive, daily scrubbing. Full immersion bathing is a luxury, an event, not a daily ritual for most people. Think about it. Water has to be hauled, often from a communal well or river, carried in heavy buckets, and then heated over a fire, a laborious and fuel-consuming process in itself. So, a quick wash of the hands and face, with a basin of probably cold water, is more the norm for the common folk. Think of it as a strategic deployment of cleanliness, rather than an all-out assault on grime. Historians still argue whether the decline of the extensive Roman public bathing culture truly led to a dark age of hygiene, or if medieval people were cleaner than pop culture sometimes portrays them. There's evidence of stew houses, or public baths in some towns, and certainly many monasteries and upper-class households maintained more regular bathing practices. But for the average person, like you, let's just say your natural, individual musk was a more constant companion, a signature scent, if you will. This brings us, inevitably, to your clothes. They are your primary shield against the elements, your second skin in this often harsh and always grubby environment. And they absorb everything. The dust from the unpaved roads, the soot from the ever-present fires, the grease from your food, eaten with your fingers or a simple knife naturally, the sweat from your body toiling in the fields or at your craft, the occasional unfortunate splash of, well, let's call it street juice, for politeness' sake. Your outer garments, likely made of wool if you can afford it, are sturdy and designed to last. Wool has some admirable natural water and dirt repellent qualities, which is a very good thing because washing it is a major, potentially garment-ruining undertaking. Beneath that, you're probably wearing linen, a shirt or smock, an under-tunic, perhaps brays, which are essentially loose-fitting undershorts or trousers. Linen is more easily washable than wool, thank goodness, but it's right next to your skin, soaking up the day's honest, or not so honest, toil. Imagine wearing the same few outfits, day in, day out, for weeks, maybe even months, especially during the cold, damp winter. There's no quick toss into the washing machine at the end of the day, no convenient dry cleaner down the road. Every single item that gets cleaned represents a significant investment of time, resources, and sheer physical energy. So, you'd air things out frequently, brush off surface dirt with a stiff brush, and try to make them last as long as humanly possible between actual full-on washes. Small wonder then that the concept of clean was perhaps a bit more relative, a bit more forgiving. A mainstream historical fact for you is that sumptuary laws, those fascinating medieval regulations, often dictated the types and colours of fabrics people of different social classes could wear. No ermine for you, peasant. But they didn't, unfortunately, mandate how often you had to wash them. Probably for the best, as enforcement would have been a logistical and aromatic nightmare. Constable, arrest that man. His surcoat smells like he hasn't seen Lye since last Michaelmas. 20 lashes for olfactory offence. Unlikely, though one can imagine the temptation. The sheer, inescapable presence of dirt and odours would have profoundly shaped your perception of the world. Things we find utterly repulsive would have been commonplace, part of the daily sensory landscape. A little dirt under the fingernails? Standard. An aroma that would make us gag? Just another Tuesday morning down by the fish market. This isn't to say medieval people liked being dirty or were oblivious to stench. Their writings often complain about foul air and miasmas, associating them with disease, which wasn't far wrong. Rather, the effort required to achieve and maintain what we consider basic cleanliness was monumental, almost unthinkable without our modern conveniences like running water, electricity, and effective, readily available cleaning agents. Your clothes, therefore, weren't just fashion statements or practical necessities. They were living chronicles of your daily life, absorbing the very essence of the medieval world you inhabited. And when they finally got too stiff with accumulated grime to bend properly, or too fragrant to bear even by the robust standards of the time, you faced the daunting prospect of laundry day. A day that didn't involve a gentle, rhythmic hum from the utility room, but a full-scale, physical battle against filth, waged with some surprisingly potent, even dangerous, chemical weapons. The battle for clean was a serious one, and it began long before you even got your hands wet, starting with the fundamental understanding that everything around you, including, to a certain extent, yourself, was, by our delicate modern standards, impressively, thoroughly, and consistently grubby. It really makes you appreciate that innocent-looking little bottle of detergent under your sink, doesn't it? Like it's some kind of benign magic potion. And in a way, compared to what you're about to face in this medieval wash day, it truly is. The very idea of freshness as we understand it, that light, almost sterile, often floral or fruity scent of modern detergents, would be utterly alien. Their clean was more about the absence of visible, caked-on mud and the reduction of an eye-watering stench to something merely earthy or perhaps faintly reminiscent of wood smoke and lye. So, you stand there, on the cusp of wash day, your bundle of soiled garments practically radiating a visible aura of need, perhaps even quietly begging for mercy, or maybe just for a decent burial. The task ahead is not for the faint of heart, nor for those with a sensitive nose or easily chapped hands. It's a testament to human resilience, really, and a deep-seated desire for order that anyone bothered at all. But bother they did, because even in a world so thoroughly steeped in grime, there was a powerful drive for some measure of cleanliness, some respite from the all-encompassing dirt. It was about health, yes, in a vaguely understood way, but also about social standing, self-respect, and perhaps just the simple human need not to feel like you were actively wearing a compost heap. The challenge was immense. The resources, by our standards, laughably primitive. And the enemy, dirt, grease, and a veritable army of medieval-level microbes, was relentless and ever-present. This is the world your clothes inhabit, the world they're about to be rescued from, one laborious, often caustic, and surprisingly communal step at a time. Now, let's talk about what you're actually trying to get clean. Your medieval wardrobe isn't exactly overflowing with delicate silks and easy care synthetics. Those are largely luxuries for the very wealthy or haven't been invented yet. You, as an average medieval person, are dealing primarily with two workhorse fabrics, wool and linen. Each comes with its own set of challenges when confronted with the medieval equivalent of a deep clean. Think of them as the dynamic duo of your daily existence, one for warmth and protection, the other for comfort and hygiene, or at least the medieval idea of hygiene. Your outer garments are almost certainly wool. Tunics, kirtles, cloaks, surcoats, hoods, hose, which are more like individual leg coverings than modern socks or tights. Wool is the go-to material, and for good reason. It's warm, incredibly durable, and has natural lanolin, which gives it a degree of water resistance and, helpfully, some inherent dirt-repelling properties. This is a blessing, because washing wool frequently is a recipe for disaster. Imagine your favourite wool sweater accidentally going through a hot wash and emerging doll-sized. Now multiply that risk by 1,000, because your medieval washing methods are considerably more aggressive. Wool, when subjected to excessive heat and agitation, especially with harsh alkaline substances like lye, will felt. It shrinks, it thickens, it becomes stiff and unwearable. So, you treat your woolen garments with a certain respect, brushing them down, airing them out, and only resorting to a full wash when they are truly, undeniably, beyond the help of a good shake and a stiff breeze. A mainstream historical fact is that different regions became famous for their wool production and specific types of woolen cloth, like the fine wools of Flanders or England, which were highly prized trade goods. The quality of your woolen cloth was a significant indicator of your social status. Richer folks could afford finer, softer wools, dyed in vibrant, expensive colours, while you might be sporting something coarser, undyed, or dyed with cheaper, locally sourced plant dyes, in shades of brown, grey, or dull yellow. Linen, on the other hand, is your everyday hero for anything worn next to the skin. Your chemise, or smock, a long shirt-like undergarment for women and men. Your brays, those baggy under-trousers or shorts. Coiffes, close-fitting caps worn by women, and sometimes men. And perhaps even bed linens, if you're reasonably prosperous, are all likely made from the fibres of the flax plant. Linen is a fantastic fabric. It's strong, absorbent, and becomes softer with each wash. Crucially, it can withstand much harsher treatment than wool. It can be boiled, scrubbed, and beaten without disintegrating, which is just as well, because it's the fabric absorbing most of your sweat, body oils, and whatever else your skin might be exuding. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of linen undergarments, which could be laundered more vigorously and frequently than woolen outerwear, contributed significantly to overall hygiene levels, and perhaps even to a reduction in skin diseases and parasites compared to earlier periods that relied more heavily on wool or animal skins directly against the body. It's a fascinating thought, your humble linen shift acting as a kind of sanitary buffer. So, your laundry pile is a study in contrasts. The heavy, sturdy, somewhat reluctant to be washed woolens, and the lighter, more frequently laundered, and comparatively more forgiving linens. The linens are likely the items getting the full, lye-soaked treatment most often. Your woolens might only get a proper wash once or twice a year, or if they suffer a catastrophic soiling incident, like an unfortunate encounter with a particularly muddy pig or a spilled jug of ale. This infrequent washing of wool also meant that people, especially the less affluent, probably smelled quite strongly of damp wool, lanolin, and accumulated life. It was just a fact of life, like the scratchiness of a new tunic, or the omnipresent chill of a stone floor in winter. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we talked about in a previous imaginary episode on Egyptian beauty secrets? Well, medieval folks had their own peculiar solutions for fabric care. One quirky tidbit: fuller's earth, a type of clay, was used not just for cleaning raw wool during its processing, fulling, but also sometimes applied to finished garments as a dry cleaning agent to absorb grease and oil. You'd rub it in, let it sit, and then brush it out, hopefully taking the dirt with it. A bit like a medieval Febreze, but with more dust. The sheer physical weight of these fabrics when wet is something to consider. Imagine your thick woolen cloak, already heavy when dry, now saturated with water. It becomes a monstrously heavy, unwieldy beast. Hauling it around, wringing it out, these are tasks requiring serious muscle. Even a pile of wet linen shifts and brays would be a substantial load. There's a reason why washerwomen, or lavenders as they were sometimes called, were often depicted as robust, strong-armed individuals. It was brutally hard physical labour, no two ways about it. The very texture of medieval life was woven into these garments. Think about the clothes of a peasant working in the fields, caked with mud, stained with sweat, perhaps torn and patched multiple times. Or the garments of a blacksmith, imbued with soot and the metallic tang of the forge. A scholar's robes might carry the faint, dusty scent of old parchment and beeswax candles. A noble lady's fine wool kirtle, dyed a rich crimson with expensive Kermes insect dye, might still bear the faint trace of her floral perfume or the spiced wine spilled at last night's feast. These clothes weren't just anonymous coverings. They were intimately connected to the wearer's life, occupation, and social standing. They told a story, And getting that story, all the accumulated grime and glory, out of the fabric was the challenge. Consider also the parasites. Fleas, lice, and other uninvited guests were constant companions in the medieval world, and clothing was prime real estate for these tiny critters. Frequent washing of linens, especially if they were boiled, would certainly help to keep their populations in check. For woolens, which couldn't be boiled, airing them in strong sunlight or near a hot fire, and vigorous brushing were the main lines of defence. Sometimes, pungent herbs like wormwood or tansy were stored with clothes to deter pests, a medieval mothball, if you will. It's a slightly unsettling thought, your clothes potentially teeming with microscopic life, but it was a reality. The desire for clean clothes wasn't just about aesthetics or smell. It was also, at a very practical level, about pest control. You're not just washing out dirt, you're evicting tiny, unwelcome tenants who've taken up residence in your seams and folds. A good, thorough wash was a minor exorcism for your wardrobe. The colours of your clothes also played a role in laundry considerations. Dyes in the medieval period were derived from natural sources: plants, insects, minerals. Some dyes were notoriously fugitive, meaning they would fade or run easily when washed, especially with harsh substances like lye. Reds from madder root, blues from woad or indigo, though indigo was more expensive and less common for everyday folk in early medieval Europe. Yellows from weld or saffron, again, saffron was a luxury. Greens, often achieved by overdying yellow with blue, and various shades of brown and grey from barks, nuts and lichens. If you had a garment dyed a particularly vibrant or precious colour, you'd be even more hesitant to subject it to a harsh wash. You might opt for spot cleaning, or a gentler wash with milder agents if possible. This is another reason why underlinens, usually undyed or bleached white, bore the brunt of the most aggressive cleaning methods. They were meant to be scrubbed clean, to be whitened, to be a symbol of purity against the skin, even if the outer layers were a bit more lived in. The whiter your linen, the more you could afford the time, effort, and materials to get it that way, making it a subtle status symbol. A pristine white coif, or wimple framing a lady's face, wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a statement about her household's resources and standards. It whispered of diligent servants and ample supplies of soapwort or carefully prepared lye. So, as you gather your bundle of soiled clothing, you're acutely aware of what it's made of, how it was dyed, if at all, and what level of abuse it can tolerate. You're not just chucking it all in together on a mixed cycle. You're making strategic decisions, triaging your garments based on material, colour, and the sheer tenacity of the filth clinging to them. This is the fabric of your medieval life, quite literally, and keeping it even remotely clean is a testament to your hard work and your knowledge of these natural fibres. It's a far cry from glancing at a care label and hoping for the best. You are the care label, and your experience, passed down through generations, tells you exactly how to handle that stubborn patch of mud on your woolen hose without turning it into a felted doorstop, and how to get your linen shift back to a semblance of respectability without completely dissolving it in a vat of something dangerously caustic. The materials themselves dictate so much of the process that follows, a constant negotiation between the desire for cleanliness and the inherent properties of what you wear. Right, you've assessed your pile of offending garments. The sturdy wools, the comparatively more washable linens, each silently broadcasting its level of grubbiness. Before you can even dream of introducing any kind of cleaning agent, whether it's lye, soapwort, or the less fragrant but surprisingly effective stale urine. Yes, we'll get to that fascinating option later. You face your first, and arguably most back-breaking, hurdle: water. Glorious, essential, and in this context, incredibly heavy water. You need a lot of it. Not just a basinful for a quick rinse, but multiple large tubs or vats full for soaking, for washing, for repeated rinsing. And unless you're a particularly fortunate soul living in a grand manor with its own dedicated well right in the courtyard, or perhaps a monastery with a sophisticated water management system, you're going to have to fetch it. This is where your day truly begins, often before the sun has even properly announced its arrival. You grab your buckets, probably made of wood, bound with iron hoops or perhaps leather. These aren't lightweight plastic pails from the hardware store. These are hefty, substantial containers, even when empty. Now, imagine filling them. Your main source of water is likely a communal well in the village square or a nearby river or stream. If it's a well, you'll lower a bucket on a rope, crank it up hand over hand, or use a windlass if the well is a fancy one. Each bucketful is a dead weight you then have to hoist, balance and carry. If your water source is a river, it might be a slightly easier dip, but the bank could be slippery, muddy, and the journey back to your washing spot, laden with sloshing, heavy buckets, is no picnic. And you won't be making just one trip. Oh no, you'll be making many. Think about the sheer volume needed. A large wooden tub, the kind you'd use for soaking a decent load of laundry, can hold many gallons. Let's be conservative and say a bucket holds about 3 gallons and weighs around 25 pounds when full. If you need, say, 30 gallons just for the initial soaking, that's 10 trips. 10 trips, back and forth, from the water source to your washing area. Your shoulders will ache, your arms will burn, your back will protest. Your hands will be raw from the rope or the wooden handle of the bucket. And this is before any actual washing has commenced. This is just the preparatory phase, the warm-up act for the main event of grime busting. It's a workout that would make a modern gym enthusiast weep. Remember that gentle ASMR cadence I'm supposed to be using? Imagine me saying, "And now you haul another 25 pounds of sloshing indifferent water for the 10th time," in a soft, sleepy whisper. The irony is not lost on me, or hopefully on you. The quality of this water is also variable. River water, as we've hinted, is a communal resource in every sense. Upstream, someone might be washing their laundry or their sheep. Animals drink from it and relieve themselves in or near it. Waste from tanneries or dyers might be flowing into it. While the movement of the water does provide some natural purification, it's hardly Evian. Well, water might be cleaner, filtered to some extent by the earth, but it can also be hard, full of minerals that can make it difficult for soaps, when you get to use them, to lather effectively. You take what you can get. A mainstream historical fact. Access to clean water was a major factor in the health and development of medieval towns and villages. Communities often grew up around reliable water sources, and disputes over water rights were not uncommon. Protecting the communal well or spring from pollution was a serious concern, and there were often local regulations attempting to do, just in case people forgot that, drinking poo water is generally a bad idea. So, you've made your pilgrimage to the river, or, well, multiple times, and now you have your precious hard-won water. You'll likely have several containers, a large one for the initial soaking and washing, and others for rinsing. If you're planning on using hot water for any part of the process, especially for stubborn linen stains, or for brewing up your lye solution, then you also need to factor in the fuel and time to heat it. This means gathering firewood, another chore in itself, and tending a fire, carefully heating the water in a large cauldron or pot. Hot water is a luxury, used strategically. Boiling large quantities of water just for laundry would be immensely resource intensive for the average household. The location of your washing will also depend on your circumstances and the weather. Some washing might be done indoors in a scullery or outbuilding if you have one, especially in bad weather. But often, particularly for the messier parts of the process involving lots of water and vigorous scrubbing, it would be done outdoors. This could be in your own yard, if you have the space, or at a designated communal washing place. Many villages and towns had specific spots, often by the riverbank, known as lavoirs or wash houses, though purpose-built covered structures were more common in later periods or wealthier areas. These communal spots were practical, providing access to water, and often flat stones or wooden boards for beating the laundry. But, as we'll explore later, they were also important social hubs. The original water cooler, if you will, but with more back-breaking labour and fewer discussions about last night's television. One quirky tidbit. Some medieval illustrations depict women washing clothes directly in the river, standing knee-deep in the cold water, even in winter. While this saved on hauling water, it must have been incredibly uncomfortable and even dangerous. Imagine the chill, the slippery rocks underfoot, the current tugging at the heavy wet fabric. It speaks to the sheer determination to get the job done, and perhaps a certain hardiness that we, in our centrally heated homes, can barely comprehend. It also makes a mockery of anyone complaining their heated swimming pool is a degree too cold. Oh, you poor dear, is your 82-degree chlorinated paradise not quite perfect? Try kneeling in a semi-frozen medieval river for 3 hours, then we'll talk. Historians still argue whether the sheer labour involved in obtaining water for laundry and other household tasks acted as a significant limiting factor on the frequency of washing, perhaps even more so than the availability of cleaning agents themselves. If it takes half a day of exhausting work just to gather enough water, you're going to be very judicious about when and what you wash. It's a cost-benefit analysis measured in aching muscles and precious time that could be spent on other essential tasks like farming, spinning, weaving, or childcare. So, the water is gathered, your muscles are already complaining. You're probably a bit damp and muddy already. And the actual cleaning hasn't even started. This initial stage is a huge, often overlooked, part of the medieval laundry process. It's the invisible labour that underpins everything else. Without this relentless hauling, there is no wash day. It's a stark reminder of how fundamentally different life was when a basic necessity, like water, wasn't instantly available at the turn of a tap. Every drop was earned through sweat and effort. You look at your vats of water, perhaps catching your breath for a moment. The sun is climbing higher, and you know you have a long day ahead. The children might be underfoot, or if they're old enough, perhaps they've helped with some of the lighter fetching and carrying. Your hands are already feeling the strain. This relentless, repetitive effort, just to secure the most basic ingredient for cleanliness, frames the entire experience. It instills a respect for water, a keen awareness of its preciousness that we've largely lost, and it sets the stage for the next, more chemically exciting and potentially hazardous part of the operation, preparing the lye, the powerful alkali that will, hopefully, conquer the accumulated filth of medieval life. But for now, you take a moment, wipe a bead of sweat from your brow with the back of an already grimy hand, and contemplate the sheer, unadulterated effort that this simple chore demands. Starting with these endless sloshing buckets, the silence of the morning is broken only by the distant crow of a rooster, the murmur of the awakening village, and the dull ache in your shoulders. Onwards. You've wrestled the water into submission, or at least into your waiting tubs and cauldrons. Your muscles are humming a dull tune of exertion. Now it's time to introduce the star player in your medieval cleaning arsenal, the heavy hitter against grime, lye. This isn't some gentle, eco-friendly detergent you picked up at the organic market. This is a powerful, caustic alkali, capable of dissolving grease, loosening dirt, and, if you're not careful, doing a pretty good job on your skin as well. Making and handling lye requires knowledge, care, and a healthy respect for its chemical power. There are no warning labels, no rubber gloves readily available, just generations of passed down wisdom, and perhaps a few cautionary tales about Aunt Agnes, who wasn't quite careful enough that one time. So, how do you get your hands on this potent potion? You make it, of course. The primary ingredient for homemade lye is wood ash, specifically ash from hardwood trees. Oak, beech, hickory, ash, the tree, confusingly enough, these are your best bets. Softwood ashes, like those from pine, produce a weaker lye. So, you've been diligently saving the ashes from your hearth, carefully setting aside the good quality hardwood ash in a dry container, perhaps a dedicated wooden barrel or a large earthenware pot. This isn't just any old ash, it's the residue of countless fires that have cooked your meals and warmed your home, now about to be reborn as a cleaning agent. There's a certain cyclical, almost alchemical poetry to it, if you're not too busy worrying about potential chemical burns. The process of extracting the lye from the ashes is essentially a leaching process. You'll need a container with a drainage hole at the bottom. A special barrel called a leach barrel or lye leach is ideal, but a large pot with a hole punched in it, or even a cleverly constructed pile of ashes on a sloped surface, can work. You'll line the bottom of this container with a layer of straw or small twigs to act as a filter, preventing the ashes themselves from washing through, a bit like a primitive coffee filter, but for much more aggressive brew. On top of this filter layer, you pack in your saved hardwood ashes. Some people might add a layer of quicklime, calcium oxide, if it's available, as this can help to produce a stronger, more caustic lye, potassium hydroxide reacting with calcium hydroxide to yield sodium hydroxide. For the chemistry geeks among us, though medieval folks just knew it worked better, now comes the water you so laboriously hauled. You'll pour it, slowly and carefully, over the packed ashes. If you're aiming for a stronger lye, you might use hot or even boiling water which you'd have heated separately in your cauldron. The water percolates down through the ashes, dissolving the soluble alkali salts, primarily potassium carbonate and potassium hydroxide. What drips out from the drainage hole at the bottom is your raw lye solution. It will be a brownish, slippery feeling liquid. The first runnings will be the strongest, and the lye will get progressively weaker as you continue to pass more water through the ashes. You'll collect this liquid in another container carefully. How do you know if your lye is strong enough? Well, you don't have pH strips or titration kits. You use folk methods. One common test was to see if an egg or a potato would float in it. If the egg potato floated with a certain amount of its surface exposed, say the size of a particular coin, the lye was deemed to be of the right strength for soap making or heavy-duty cleaning. Too weak, and it wouldn't do the job. Too strong, and it would be excessively harsh on fabrics, not to mention your hands. Another, perhaps less appealing, but more direct method was the taste test. A tiny, cautious dab on the tongue. A strong lye would have a sharp, biting, alkaline taste. Definitely not recommended, but it speaks to the practical, hands-on nature of medieval chemistry. They were working with their senses, and a good deal of trial and error. Historians still argue whether the egg test was a reliable and universally applied standard, or more of a general guideline with significant regional variations in practice. This freshly made lye solution is often called first ashes water, or lye water. It's precious stuff, the product of considerable effort, from saving the right kind of ash to the careful leaching process. You handle it with respect. A mainstream historical fact, lye was not only crucial for laundry, but also a key ingredient in soap making. By boiling lye with animal fats, medieval people created a basic, often harsh, soap. The quality of soap varied enormously, from coarse, dark, utilitarian stuff to finer, sometimes scented with herbs or flowers, soaps for the wealthy. But the fundamental chemistry of saponification, fats plus alkali, was the same. You now have your active ingredient, but it's not always used neat, especially not on more delicate items or for all stages of washing. You might dilute it further with more water, depending on the task at hand. For the truly, deeply, offensively soiled garments, think your husband's work tunic after a week of mucking out the pigsty, or bed linens that have seen far too much action. You might use a fairly strong lye solution for an initial heavy-duty soak. This process, often called bucking, is where the lye really gets to flex its chemical muscles. One quirky tidbit about ash. Beyond its use for lye, wood ash itself was sometimes used as a mild abrasive cleaner, a bit like a medieval scouring powder, for pots and pans or even for teeth, though that sounds gritty. It also had agricultural uses, as a fertilizer, returning some of those valuable minerals to the soil. So nothing was wasted. The humble ash was a surprisingly versatile substance in the medieval household. The dangers of lye cannot be overstated, especially for us modern folk accustomed to much milder cleaning products. Lye is corrosive. It can cause severe chemical burns on contact with skin. Splashes in the eyes can lead to blindness. Inhaling the fumes or steam from hot lye solutions can irritate the respiratory tract. Medieval people were undoubtedly tougher and more accustomed to everyday hazards, but accidents surely happened. There would have been no emergency rooms, no specialised burn units. A severe lye burn would have been a very serious, potentially life-threatening or permanently disfiguring injury, treated with whatever folk remedies were at hand, poultices of herbs, bread and milk, or perhaps just a prayer. So, while you're performing this alchemical transformation of ash and water into a potent cleaner, you're doing it with focused attention, keeping children and pets well away, and trying your best not to slosh the potent liquid onto your own unprotected skin. It's a high-stakes operation in your humble backyard. You wouldn't be wearing fancy safety goggles or night trial gloves. Maybe you'd wrap your hands in rags if you were particularly cautious or had sensitive skin. But mostly, it was just about being careful and hoping for the best. The lye solution sits there, in its tub or pot, a potent, slightly ominous-looking liquid. It doesn't smell floral or fresh. It has a distinct, sharp, alkaline tang, the smell of serious cleaning power. It's the secret weapon that will break down the grease and grime that mere water alone cannot touch. It's a far cry from the gentle bubbling of a modern washing machine. This is chemistry in its raw, untamed medieval form. You've taken a waste product, wood ash, and through a process of careful extraction, transformed it into something of immense practical value. It's a small act of domestic science, repeated in countless households across the medieval world, a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of cleanliness, even when the tools are rudimentary and the risks are very real. You gaze at your homemade lye, a mixture of pride and trepidation. The next stage, the actual confrontation between lye and laundry, is about to begin, and it's going to be a vigorous one. With your hard-won water ready and your potent lye solution carefully prepared, it's time for the medieval equivalent of a pre-soak cycle, but on steroids. This is often referred to as bucking the laundry, and it's a crucial step, especially for your heavily soiled linens, those hard-working shifts, smocks, and undertunics that have borne the brunt of daily medieval life. Woolens, remember, are generally spared this aggressive lye treatment, if at all possible, due to their tendency to felt and shrink. So, you're primarily focusing on the linen pile for this intense chemical bath. You select your largest, sturdiest wooden tub, or vat, the one you've designated as your bucking tub. This isn't a casual dip. This is a prolonged immersion in a fairly strong, often hot, lye solution, designed to loosen the deep-seated dirt, break down grease, and begin the whitening process for your linens. You lay the dirtiest items at the bottom, perhaps layering them somewhat loosely. Then, you pour over your lye solution, diluted to the appropriate strength based on your experience and the grimminess of the load. For particularly stubborn laundry, you might use the lye solution hot, heated in your cauldron. This dramatically increases its cleaning power, but also the risks involved in handling it. Imagine pouring steaming, caustic liquid onto a pile of clothes, the alkaline fumes rising to meet you. It's a sensory experience, and not necessarily a pleasant one. Once the clothes are submerged in the lye water, they are left to soak. This isn't a quick 30-minute pre-soak. This could be an overnight affair, or at least for several hours. The lye needs time to work its magic, to chemically attack the bonds between the fabric and the accumulated layers of sweat, body oils, food spills, and general medieval detritus. During this soaking period, you might occasionally agitate the clothes, perhaps by prodding them with a sturdy wooden stick or paddle, something you definitely don't want to put your bare hands into for any length of time. This helps the lye to penetrate more evenly and dislodge more dirt. It's a bit like a very slow, very potent, and somewhat menacing washing machine, powered by chemistry and patience. The term bucking itself is interesting. It's thought to derive from the Old English word book, meaning a pitcher or vessel, or perhaps related to words meaning to steep or soak. It also carries a connotation of bleaching, as lye was one of the primary bleaching agents available. A mainstream historical fact is that achieving a brilliant white for linens was highly prized in the medieval period, as it signified cleanliness, purity, and often status. Think of the pristine white wimples of nuns, or the crisp white coifs of wealthy merchant wives. This whiteness wasn't easily achieved. It was the result of laborious washing with lye, often followed by extended periods of grassing, laying the damp linens out on a grassy meadow in direct sunlight, allowing the sun's rays to further bleach the fabric. This combination of lye and sun was the medieval precursor to modern chlorine bleach. The bucking tub, with its murky, lye-infused contents, would be a common sight on wash days. It wasn't a pretty process. The water would quickly become discoloured as the lye went to work, pulling out an astonishing amount of filth from the seemingly innocent-looking linens. The smell would be a combination of the sharp lye and the smell of dirty laundry stewing. Not exactly Chanel No. 5. More like eau de medieval grime, unfiltered. You'd probably try to keep the bucking tub covered, if possible, to retain heat if you used hot lye, to keep out debris, and perhaps to contain some of the less than delightful aromas, and definitely to keep curious children or animals from investigating its contents too closely. A playful puppy taking a sip from the bucking tub would not have a good day. One quirky tidbit. Some historical accounts suggest that a layer of clean ashes was sometimes placed on top of the laundry in the bucking tub, with the hot water then poured through this ash layer and onto the clothes beneath. This would create a continuous, slow leaching of fresh lye directly into the wash, a sort of self-replenishing lye bath. It's a clever, if somewhat complex, setup, showcasing the ingenuity employed in maximising the cleaning power of available resources. Imagine designing a system where your cleaning agent is generated in situ as part of the soaking process. That's some next-level medieval domestic engineering. Historians still argue whether the prolonged soaking in lye significantly weakened the linen fibres over time, leading to a shorter lifespan for garments despite linen's inherent strength. Repeated exposure to strong alkalis can certainly degrade cellulose fibres. It's a trade-off: cleaner, whiter linens versus potentially faster wear and tear. Given the value of textiles, every thread spun by hand, every yard woven on a loom, this would have been a genuine consideration. You wouldn't want your precious shift dissolving into nothingness after just a few too many enthusiastic bucking sessions. It's that constant medieval balancing act between necessity and preservation. This bucking process is the heavy artillery of your laundry day. It's where the serious chemical warfare against dirt takes place. It's not subtle, and it's not gentle. It's a brutal, effective soak designed to deal with the kind of ingrained grime that would make a modern detergent throw in the towel and weep. You, as the medieval launderer, are a chemist, a materials scientist of a practical sort, and a patient observer, all rolled into one. You're judging the strength of your lye, the duration of the soak, the type of fabric, and the level of soiling, all based on experience and tradition. There are no instruction manuals, no helpful YouTube tutorials, other than this one, of course, beamed back in time by some temporal anomaly. While the linens are enjoying their caustic spa treatment in the bucking tub, you're not just idly waiting. There are other tasks to attend to. Perhaps you're preparing for the next stage of washing for items that don't require such an intense lye bath, or maybe you're dealing with those tricky woolens which need a different, gentler approach. Or perhaps you're just taking a moment to rest your already aching back, contemplating the sheer, unadulterated effort involved in this supposedly simple domestic chore. The medieval world didn't really do downtime in the way we understand it. Every moment was potentially productive. The bucking process highlights the medieval understanding, however empirical, of chemical cleaning. They knew that certain substances, like the alkalis derived from wood ash, had a powerful effect on dirt and grease. They harnessed this knowledge through generations of trial and error, creating a system that, while laborious and potentially hazardous, got the job done. It's a far cry from tossing a pod into a machine and pressing a button. This is hands-on, elemental cleaning. The lye is doing the heavy lifting, but it's your knowledge and labour that make it possible. The quiet bubbling or steamy stillness of the bucking tub is a testament to a hidden science, a domestic alchemy transforming filth into a state of relative cleanliness. After the prescribed soaking time, when you judge that the lye has done its primary work, the clothes will be lifted from the bucking tub carefully, as they are now saturated with caustic liquid. They will be heavy, dripping, and probably look rather alarming, the water around them a testament to the dirt they've shed. The next stage will involve rinsing and further washing, but this initial, aggressive soak has broken the back of the worst grime. It's a satisfying moment, in a way, to know that the most stubborn, entrenched dirt is beginning to yield. But it's also a reminder of just how dirty things could get, and the sheer power needed to restore even a semblance of freshness. Your humble linen shift, after a good bucking, is on its way to being reborn, ready to face another round of medieval life, thanks to the potent, transformative power of lye. It's a victory, hard won, one caustic soak at a time. Once your linens have endured their invigorating and slightly terrifying lye bath in the bucking tub, or if you're dealing with less heavily soiled items, or those precious woolens that wisely sidestep the caustic soak, the next phase of active physical cleaning begins. This isn't about delicate hand washing with a gentle swish. This is where brute force meets fabric. You're now equipped with the tools of the trade, which are, by modern standards, remarkably simple, yet surprisingly effective when wielded with skill and a good deal of elbow grease. These implements are extensions of your own strength, designed to beat, scrub, and agitate the dirt out of every fibre. Probably the most iconic tool of the medieval washerwoman is the laundry bat or beetle. This is essentially a flat, heavy, wooden paddle, sometimes with a short handle, sometimes longer, almost like a cricket bat, but broader and flatter. Think of it as a medieval bludgeon for dirt. After the clothes have soaked, either in lye for linens, or perhaps just plain water or a milder solution for wools, they would be taken to a firm, flat surface. This could be a large smooth rock by the riverside, a sturdy wooden plank or washing board set over a tub, or a dedicated section of a stone-built communal washhouse. You lay the wet garment flat, and then you beat it, systematically, rhythmically, vigorously. The impact of the bat forces the water through the fibres, dislodging trapped dirt particles. It's a percussive cleaning method and it's surprisingly effective, especially on sturdy fabrics like linen. You'd repeatedly strike the garment, turn it over, fold it, and beat it again, ensuring all areas received this robust attention. It sounds brutal, and it was, but it was a key part of getting clothes clean before the invention of agitators in washing machines. Your arms would ache, your shoulders would burn, but the sight of dirty water being literally pounded out of the fabric would be your reward. It's a very direct, very physical conversation with grime. Then there's the scrubbing. While sometimes the beating alone was sufficient, for more stubborn areas, or for fabrics that couldn't withstand excessive beating, scrubbing was essential. You might use a stiff bristled brush if you had one. Brushes were made with animal bristles, like boar or horsehair, set into a wooden handle. These would be used to scrub at particularly soiled spots, working the cleaning solution, whether it's lye water, soap, or something else, into the fabric. More commonly though, scrubbing involved rubbing the fabric against itself or against a rough surface. Purpose-built washboards with corrugated surfaces made of wood or sometimes metal became more common over time, but even without a dedicated board, you could use a rough stone or a textured wooden plank. You'd bunch up a section of the garment, apply your cleaning agent, and rub it vigorously. Imagine trying to get a stubborn grass stain out of a pair of jeans, but the jeans are hand-spun, hand-woven linen, and your stain remover is a homemade concoction of wood ash. Your knuckles would be raw, your hands chapped, especially if you were working with lye solutions without any protection. Another tool, though perhaps less of an implement and more of a technique, was treading or trampling. For large, bulky items, or when washing a large quantity of clothes together in a tub, people would actually get into the tub with their bare feet and tread on the laundry, much like treading grapes for wine. This was particularly common in some regions, and for certain types of washing, like the initial cleaning of freshly shorn fleeces, though that's more textile processing than domestic laundry. The weight and motion of the body helped to agitate the clothes and force water and cleaning agents through them. It's a full-body workout, this laundry business. One mainstream historical fact. Roman fullers, who cleaned and processed woolen cloth, were famous for treading cloth in vats of alkaline solutions, including stale urine. While this practice was more industrial, the principle of using foot power for agitation persisted in domestic laundry in various forms. You can almost picture a row of washerwomen, skirts hitched up, rhythmically treading their laundry in a communal trough, perhaps singing a work song to keep the rhythm and pass the time. Wringing the clothes was another physically demanding task, and while not a tool in the manufactured sense, your own two hands, or perhaps a pair of strong hands if you had a helper, were the primary wringers. After beating or scrubbing, you'd twist the fabric as tightly as possible to expel the dirty water before rinsing. For larger, heavier items like blankets or thick woolen cloaks, this might involve two people, each taking an end and twisting in opposite directions, a human-powered spin cycle. Sometimes, a sturdy stick might be used to help twist the fabric, inserting it into a loop of the cloth and using it as a lever to get more torque, a kind of proto-mangle. The more water you could wring out at each stage, the less you'd have to carry, and the more effective the subsequent rinsing would be. Historians still argue about the exact design and prevalence of early washing machines or mechanical aids beyond these basic tools. While complex machinery was obviously centuries away, there are occasional hints or depictions of slightly more elaborate setups, perhaps lever-operated pounders or rudimentary agitators in larger households or monastic laundries. However, for the vast majority of medieval people, the tools were simple, robust, and relied entirely on human power. There was no plug-and-play option. One quirky tidbit: the possing, stick, or posser, also known as a dolly in some regions, though that term is more associated with later periods, was a tool used for agitating clothes in a tub. It was typically a pole with a block or a set of feet or pegs at the bottom, sometimes even a cone or plunger shape. You would plunge this up and down into the tub of clothes and water, forcing the liquid through the fabric. It was a way to achieve agitation without having to get into the tub yourself or beat the clothes individually on a flat surface. It's like a manual, vertical washing machine agitator. Imagine doing that for an hour. Your arms and back would be screaming. It's a testament to the human desire to find slightly more efficient, if still incredibly laborious, ways to tackle a relentless chore. These tools, the bat, the brush, your hands, your feet, the possing stick, were the unsung heroes of the medieval laundry. They were often homemade or locally crafted, passed down through generations, repaired and re-repaired until they were beyond use. They represent a direct, physical engagement with the process of cleaning, a world away from our detached, automated methods. There's an intimacy with the materials, with the water, with the dirt itself that is hard for us to imagine. You're not just pressing a button, you are physically battling the grime, armed with these simple, heavy implements. The sounds of wash day would be distinctive. The rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of laundry bats against wet cloth, the vigorous scrubbing, the sloshing of water, the grunts of exertion. If you were near a communal washing place, these sounds would mingle with the chatter and songs of the washerwomen, creating a unique soundscape. It was the soundtrack of cleanliness being hard won. Each tool required its own technique, its own rhythm. You'd learn from your mother, your grandmother, from other women in the village, the most effective way to wield a beetle without exhausting yourself too quickly, how to scrub without damaging the fabric excessively, how to wring out every last drop of dirty water. It was skilled labour, even if it was unpaid domestic labour for most women. The quality of the wash depended not just on the cleaning agents, but on the skill and endurance with which these tools were used. A well-beaten and thoroughly scrubbed garment would be noticeably cleaner than one that had received a more cursory treatment. So, you put your back into it. Quite literally, wielding these primitive but essential instruments in the ongoing war against medieval muck. While lye, derived from wood ash, was undoubtedly the workhorse for heavy-duty cleaning and bleaching of linens, it wasn't the only cleaning agent in the medieval launderer's arsenal. Depending on availability, the type of fabric, the nature of the stain, and local traditions, you might employ a surprising range of alternative cleaners. Some were gentler, some were more specialised, and some, to our modern sensibilities, might seem downright bizarre. But in a world without commercially produced detergents, people were incredibly resourceful, utilising the chemical properties of everyday substances, even those we might now consider waste products. One of the most well-known, and perhaps eyebrow-raising, alternatives was stale urine. Yes, you heard that right. Aged human urine, collected and allowed to ferment, was a surprisingly effective cleaning agent, particularly for woolens and for degreasing raw wool before spinning. The magic ingredient here is ammonia. As urine decomposes, urea breaks down into ammonia, which is an alkaline substance and a good grease solvent. So, families or communities might have a designated piss pot, a charming term. I know where urine was collected and left to age for a few days or weeks until it reached the desired level of ammoniacal potency. It sounds incredibly unappetizing, and the aroma must have been memorable, to say the least, but it worked. The ammonia helped to dissolve grease and dirt without being as harsh on wool fibres as lye could be. It was also used in textile production for fulling and dyeing. A mainstream historical fact: the Romans famously used urine collected from public urinals for laundry and tanning, even imposing a tax on its collection, the vectigal urinae. This practice certainly continued into the medieval period, a testament to its effectiveness, however pungent the process. You can just imagine the conversation. "Darling, is the special laundry liquid ripe yet?" "Almost, my love. Just a few more days of maturing." It's a good reminder that our notions of waste are culturally conditioned. Another important category of alternative cleaners involved certain types of clay or earth. Fuller's earth, a naturally occurring clayey substance, composed mainly of hydrous aluminum silicates, for those keeping notes on medieval geology, was widely used in the process of fulling woolen cloth. Fulling was a crucial step in finishing wool, involving pounding and scouring the cloth in water with an alkaline agent to clean it, shrink it, and felt the fibres together, making it thicker and more durable. Fuller's earth was excellent at absorbing oils, grease, and impurities from the raw wool. While primarily an industrial process carried out by fullers in mills, the principles were understood, and fuller's earth or similar absorbent clays could also be used in domestic laundry, especially for spot cleaning greasy stains on garments. You'd make a paste of the clay and water, apply it to the stain, let it dry, and then brush it off, hopefully taking the grease with it. It's like a medieval dry cleaning paste. This method was particularly useful for delicate fabrics, or those that couldn't withstand vigorous washing or harsh chemicals. Then there were plant-based cleaners, the medieval green alternatives, if you will. Several plants contained saponins, naturally occurring compounds that produce a soapy lather when agitated in water. The most well-known of these is soapwort, Saponaria officinalis, also charmingly called bouncing bet or latherwort. The roots and leaves of soapwort, when crushed and agitated in water, create a gentle, sudsy liquid that could be used for washing delicate fabrics like silk or fine wools, or for items that weren't heavily soiled. It was much milder than lye and wouldn't damage sensitive fibres or fugitive dyes as easily. You might cultivate a patch of soapwort in your herb garden specifically for this purpose. Other plants, like horse chestnuts, conkers, or ivy leaves, also contain saponins and were used in some regions for laundry. It's a bit like making your own shampoo from nature's bounty, but for your clothes. These plant-based cleaners wouldn't have the heavy-duty degreasing power of lye or stale urine, but for a gentle freshening up, they were a valuable resource. Historians still argue about the prevalence and effectiveness of actual soap in everyday medieval laundry for the common person. While soap made from animal fat and lye, or plant ashes, was known and produced, its quality varied greatly, and it could be relatively expensive or time-consuming to make. Was it a common household item used regularly for laundry by all social classes, or was it more of a luxury, with lye solutions, urine, and plant-based cleaners being the more common go-to options for the bulk of washing? The evidence is somewhat ambiguous, likely varying by region, period, and economic status. Certainly, by the later Middle Ages, soap making was a more established trade, and soap became more widely available, but in earlier periods, or for poorer households, it might have been used more sparingly. You might save your precious cake of coarse, homemade soap for personal washing, or for particularly difficult laundry tasks, relying on other methods for the general wash. One quirky tidbit. Ox gall, the bile extracted from the gallbladder of an ox, was renowned as a powerful stain remover, particularly for grease and protein-based stains. Bile contains acids and enzymes that help break down fats. It sounds rather gruesome. Pass the ox bile, dear, I've got a gravy stain on my best tunic, but it was a staple in the medieval stain removal kit. It was often mixed with other ingredients, like soap or fuller's earth, to create a potent cleaning paste. You could buy dried ox gall from apothecaries, or perhaps prepare it yourself if you were involved in butchering animals. It's another example of using every part of the animal, and a reminder that effective cleaning often involved some rather visceral ingredients. The thought of rubbing cow stomach juices on your clothes is a bit of a leap from our modern delicately scented spot removers, isn't it? Other substances sometimes mentioned in connection with medieval laundry include things like bran, the outer layer of cereal grains, which could be boiled in water to create a mild, softening liquid, perhaps used for rinsing or for delicate items. Wood ashes themselves, not just the lye extracted from them, could be used as a mild abrasive or added to the wash water for their alkaline properties. Salt was sometimes used perhaps as a fixative for certain dyes or to help remove specific types of stains. The choice of cleaner would be a careful calculation. Is the garment wool or linen? Is it dyed with a precious fugitive colour? Is it caked in mud and pig filth, or just in need of a gentle freshening? Do you have access to good hardwood ashes for lye, or is your soapwort plant flourishing? Is the special laundry liquid in the corner pot sufficiently mature? These were the practical considerations that dictated your chemical approach. It was a far more nuanced and resource-dependent process than our modern, one-size-fits-most detergent solutions. You were a practicing chemist, using the raw materials of your environment to achieve the best possible clean, armed with knowledge passed down through generations and a good deal of practical experience. The variety of these alternative cleaners speaks to the ingenuity and adaptability of medieval people, making the most of what nature and their own bodies provided. However unconventional some of those sources might seem to us today, it certainly puts a new spin on natural cleaning products. So, you've got your general cleaning agents sorted, the powerful lye for the heavy lifting on linens, perhaps some stale urine for the woolens, or a gentle infusion of soapwort for your more delicate items. But what about those truly stubborn, specific stains that seem to mock your best efforts? Medieval life was full of opportunities for acquiring interesting and challenging marks on your clothing. Think blood from an accident or butchering, grass stains from a tumble in the meadow, ink from a clumsy scribe, wine from a boisterous feast, rust from a forgotten needle, or the dreaded mildew from damp storage. For these, you needed targeted treatments, the medieval equivalent of specialist stain removers, and some of their solutions were, shall we say, rather inventive. Let's start with bloodstains. A fairly common occurrence in a world of manual labour, sharp tools, and no readily available antiseptic wipes. Fresh blood was often treated with cold water, as hot water would set the stain by coagulating the proteins. This is a piece of laundry wisdom that has endured through the ages. But for older set-in bloodstains, medieval launderers might turn to some surprising remedies. One recommendation that pops up in various old texts is the use of saliva. Yes, spit. The enzymes in saliva can help to break down protein stains. So, you might apply your own, or perhaps someone else's if you weren't feeling up to it, saliva to the bloodstain and let it work its magic before washing. It's a bit personal, but hey, if it works. Another option for blood, and indeed for many stubborn stains, was the aforementioned ox gall, its potent bile acids working to dissolve the offending mark. Grass stains, the bane of parents everywhere even today, were also a common problem. Medieval solutions often involved acidic substances. Lemon juice. If available, lemons were more of a luxury item in Northern Europe for much of the period, but certainly known in southern regions and through trade, was prized for its bleaching and stain-removing properties. You'd rub the juice onto the grass stain, and perhaps expose it to sunlight to enhance the effect. Verjuice, the sour juice of unripe grapes, was another acidic option that could be used. Sometimes a paste of breadcrumbs and milk was recommended, which sounds more like a snack than a stain remover, but the mild abrasiveness of the bread and the fats in the milk might have had some effect on certain types of stains. Ink stains were a particular challenge, especially with the iron gall ink commonly used in the medieval period. This ink, made from iron salts and tannic acids from oak galls, was very permanent and could be corrosive to fabric over time. Removing it was a tricky business. Again, acidic substances were often employed. Sour milk, or buttermilk, were sometimes recommended, the lactic acid supposedly helping to lift the ink. Lemon juice or verjuice might also be tried. One quirky tidbit. Some old recipes suggest using milk that has been used to boil an onion, or even applying a freshly cut onion directly to the ink stain. The sulfur compounds in onions might have had some chemical effect. Or perhaps it was just one of those try-anything folk remedies. It certainly would have added an interesting aroma to your freshly laundered tunic. Is that the new eau d'onion scent? Or did you just have an unfortunate incident with the ink pot again, Brother Michael? Wine stains, especially red wine, were another common peril of medieval life, particularly for those who enjoyed a tipple or two. A mainstream historical fact is that wine was a very common drink in many parts of medieval Europe, often safer than water. Spills were inevitable. Salt was a common first aid treatment for fresh wine spills, sprinkled liberally on the stain to absorb the liquid before it could set. For older stains, various concoctions might be tried. Sometimes boiling milk was poured through the stained fabric. Other remedies involved ashes or even fresh warm animal dung. Yes, you read that correctly. The ammonia and other compounds in fresh dung were thought to have bleaching and stain-lifting properties. It's a rather extreme solution, and one imagines it would require a very thorough subsequent washing to remove all traces of the remedy itself. You'd have to be pretty desperate to resort to that one. "My lord, your finest velvet doublet has a terrible wine stain." Fear not, Jeeves. Fetch the freshest cowpat. Rust stains, perhaps from armour, tools, or even pins and needles left in damp fabric, were another nuisance. Acidic treatments were the go-to here as well. Lemon juice, or sorrel juice. Sorrel is a plant with a sharp, lemony taste due to oxalic acid, would be applied to the rust stain, sometimes with the addition of salt and the garment left in the sun. The acid would react with the iron oxide, helping to dissolve it. Repeated applications might be necessary for stubborn rust marks. Mildew, the unwelcome guest in damply stored clothes, was not just unsightly, but also damaging to fabrics and had a distinct, musty odour. Sunlight was the primary weapon against mildew, as exposure to strong sun could kill the mould spores and bleach out the stains. For more persistent mildew, a wash with a lye solution or a scrubbing with soap and water, followed by thorough sun drying, was recommended. Sometimes clothes were smoked over a fire of aromatic woods to help combat mildew and impart a more pleasant scent. Historians still argue about the efficacy of many of these old stain removal recipes. Were they genuinely effective chemical treatments based on empirical observation? Or were some of them closer to old wives' tales, with a hefty dose of placebo effect or wishful thinking? It's likely a mixture. Some, like the use of acids on rust or cold water on fresh blood, have a sound chemical basis. Others, like the bread and milk paste, seem less scientifically plausible, but might have offered some mild, abrasive or absorbent benefit. The key thing is that people were experimenting, observing and passing down knowledge in an attempt to preserve their valuable textiles from the myriad stains that medieval life could inflict. These specific stain treatments were often applied before the general wash. You'd tackle the ink spot or the blood stain first, trying to lift as much of it as possible, and then the garment would go into the main laundry process. It was a multi-stage attack on dirt and discoloration, and it required a good eye to identify the type of stain and a good memory, or access to someone with a good memory, for the appropriate remedy. There were no handy stain removal guides printed on the back of the detergent bottle. It was all part of the oral tradition of household management, a body of knowledge held and passed on primarily by women. Imagine you, the medieval launderer, faced with a particularly gruesome stain on a valuable piece of linen. You'd examine it closely, perhaps sniff it, though some stains you might not want to get too close to, and then delve into your mental encyclopedia of stain-fighting lore. Ah, that looks like a blackberry stain from young Thomas's misadventures in the hedgerow. Time for some sour milk and a bit of sunshine. It's a very practical, hands-on form of problem-solving, using the, sometimes surprising, resources available to you to battle the blemishes and restore your garments to a state of wearable respectability. Each stain told a story, and your job was to try and erase that story, or at least fade it into a less noticeable whisper. After the intense chemical warfare of the lye soak, the vigorous pummeling with the laundry bat, and the targeted assaults on stubborn stains, your medieval laundry is, hopefully, significantly cleaner. But it's also saturated with lye, soap residues, dissolved dirt, and perhaps even the lingering essence of stale urine or oxgall, depending on which alternative cleaners you deployed. The next crucial step is rinsing, and then, just to be sure, probably rinsing again. Getting all those potent cleaning agents and loosened grime out of the fabric is essential, not just for the feel and longevity of the clothes, but also for the comfort and health of the wearer. You don't want to be walking around with lye-infused undergarments. That's a recipe for some serious skin irritation, or worse. This is where the river, stream, or a very large supply of fresh, clean water becomes absolutely indispensable once more. If you've been doing your washing at home, away from a natural watercourse, you're now faced with either hauling all your wet, heavy laundry to the river, or hauling vast quantities of rinse water to your laundry. Often, the former was the more practical option, especially if the river wasn't too far distant. So, you'd load up your baskets or bundles of damp, partially cleaned clothes, a heavy, sloshing burden, and make the trek to the nearest suitable spot on the riverbank. This spot would ideally have relatively clean, flowing water and perhaps some convenient flat rocks or a gently sloping bank where you could work. Once at the water's edge, the rinsing process itself is laborious. You take each garment, immerse it in the flowing river water, swish it around vigorously, lift it, wring it out, and repeat. The coldness of the river water, especially outside of the summer months, would be a significant factor. Imagine your hands, already chapped and sore from the washing process, now plunged repeatedly into icy water. Numbness would quickly set in, followed by a deep, aching chill. Yet, the work had to be done. You're watching the water that's wrung out of the clothes, looking for it to run clear, or at least clearer, as a sign that the lye and dirt are being flushed away. This isn't a quick dunk, it's a thorough, repetitive process designed to ensure that as little of the harsh cleaning solution as possible remains in the fibres. For larger, heavier items like blankets or thick tunics, you might need to get right into the water, or at least stand knee-deep, to manage them effectively. You'd hold one end of the garment and let the current flow through it, helping to carry away the loosened particles and residues. The river itself becomes a giant rinsing machine, powered by nature. There's a certain elemental quality to this, a direct interaction with the natural world in the pursuit of cleanliness. You are, quite literally, washing your dirt downstream. Hopefully, no one is trying to draw their drinking water just a little further down from where you're enthusiastically rinsing out your lye-soaked smalls. It's all about location, location, location on the riverbank. A mainstream historical fact: communal washing places by rivers, known as lavoirs in France or wasplats in German-speaking areas, were common features of medieval towns and villages. Sometimes these were simple, designated stretches of riverbank, but in wealthier or more organised communities they could be purpose-built structures, perhaps with stone basins, wooden platforms, and even roofs, to offer some protection from the elements. These places were vital infrastructure, facilitating the essential task of laundry for the entire community. They recognised that clean clothes were a communal good. The sheer volume of water required for effective rinsing is immense. If you weren't by a river, but were relying on well water, you'd be emptying and refilling your rinsing tubs multiple times. Each garment would go through several changes of fresh water. This just adds to the incredible labour of water hauling that we discussed earlier. It's not just water for washing, it's an equal, if not greater, amount for rinsing. The efficiency of your rinsing directly impacted the quality of the final product. Poorly rinsed clothes would feel harsh, smell of lye, and potentially cause skin problems. Well-rinsed clothes would be softer, fresher, in a medieval sense, and more comfortable to wear. One quirky tidbit: in some areas, particularly where the water was very hard, full of minerals that react with soap and lye, making them less effective and harder to rinse out, people might add a small amount of vinegar or soured wine to the final rinse water. The mild acidity would help to neutralize any remaining alkaline residues from the lye or soap, making the clothes feel softer and potentially brighter. This is a practice that has echoes in modern advice to use vinegar as a fabric softener. It seems our medieval ancestors were already onto that little laundry hack. A splash of last week's slightly too sour cider in the rinse, Matilda. It does wonders for the feel of the master's hose. Historians still argue about the environmental impact of medieval laundry practices on waterways. While the population density was much lower than today, the direct discharge of lye, soap, urine, and concentrated filth into rivers must have had some localized effects on water quality and aquatic life, especially in larger towns, with many households washing in the same stretch of river. However, the natural dilution and self-purification capacity of flowing rivers would have mitigated this to some extent, and the cleaning agents themselves were largely biodegradable, unlike some of our modern chemical concoctions. Still, it's a reminder that human activities have always had an environmental footprint, even in pre-industrial times. The process of rinsing was also a chance to inspect your handiwork. As the clothes became cleaner and the water clearer, you could better assess how well the washing had gone. Were there any stubborn stains still lurking? Had any damage occurred to the fabric during the vigorous beating or scrubbing? It was a moment of quality control, medieval style. You'd be looking for that satisfying feeling of cleanly rinsed fabric, no longer slippery with lye, no longer exuding murky water when squeezed. And of course, the riverbank was often a social space. While the work was hard, it was often done in the company of other women from the village or neighbourhood. The rhythmic work of rinsing, like beating or scrubbing, could be accompanied by chatter, gossip, songs, and the sharing of news and advice. We'll delve more into the social aspect of wash day later, but it's important to remember that even this cold, wet, laborious task was often embedded in a communal context. The shared hardship and the accompanying social interaction might have made the chilling water and aching backs slightly more bearable. Finally, after what seems like an eternity of dipping, swishing and wringing in the cold river, you deem the rinsing complete. The clothes are now as free of cleaning agents and dirt as you can possibly get them. They are heavy with clean water, dripping, and probably making your arms feel like they're about to detach from your shoulders. But this crucial stage is done. The aggressive chemicals have been tamed, their residues largely banished. The fabric, while still sodden, is on its way to becoming wearable again. You gather your thoroughly rinsed, incredibly heavy laundry, ready for the next challenge, getting it dry in a world without tumble dryers or even reliable weather forecasts. The chill of the river water lingers on your skin, a reminder of the effort expended as you turn your thoughts to the sun, the wind, and a prayer for good drying conditions. Your laundry is now officially, certifiably clean, or at least as clean as medieval methods and your aching muscles can make it. It's been soaked, bucked, beaten, scrubbed, and rinsed into submission. But it's also incredibly, massively, overwhelmingly wet. And in a world without the magical convenience of a tumble dryer, or even a reliably heated drying room for most people, getting this sodden mass of fabric dry is an entirely separate challenge, fraught with its own set of anxieties and potential pitfalls. You are now at the mercy of the elements, and sometimes the less scrupulous members of your community. The first step, after the final rinse, is another round of wringing, as vigorous as you can manage. Every drop of water you can physically expel now is a drop that doesn't have to evaporate later. For smaller items, like shifts or coifs, you can twist them tightly by hand. For larger, heavier pieces, like woolen tunics or linen bedsheets, if you're grand enough to have them, you might need that two-person twisting technique again, or the stick and loop method to get maximum leverage. Remember those medieval laundry bats? Sometimes, after rinsing, clothes were beaten again, Not to remove dirt this time, but to physically force out more water. It's all about minimizing the drying time, because damp fabric is a breeding ground for mildew, and the longer it stays wet, the higher the risk of it acquiring a new, unwelcome earthy aroma, undoing all your hard work. Once you've wrung out as much water as humanly possible, it's time to find a suitable place to dry your precious, hard-won cleanliness. The ideal scenario, of course, is a sunny, breezy day. Sunlight is your best friend here. It's a natural disinfectant, a bleaching agent, especially for linens. Remember that grassing technique where damp linen was laid on grass to be whitened by the sun? And, most importantly, a source of drying heat. Wind is also a huge help, whisking away the moisture-laden air around the fabric and speeding up evaporation. So, on a perfect wash day, you'd be looking for an open, sunny spot, perhaps in your own yard if you had one, or a communal drying green if your village provided such a luxury. What did you hang your clothes on? Well, purpose-made clotheslines as we know them, strung between poles, were not necessarily a common feature for everyone, though ropes of hemp or other natural fibres certainly existed and could be used. More often, you'd make use of whatever was available. Bushes and hedges were popular choices, their branches providing a natural, airy framework. You'd drape your linens and woolens carefully over the foliage, hoping the thorns wouldn't snag the fabric too much and that no passing goat would decide your clean chemise looked like a tasty snack. Fences, if you had them, were another option. Low stone walls, warmed by the sun, could also serve as drying racks. Sometimes, clothes were simply laid flat on clean grass in a sunny spot. This was particularly common for bleaching linens, as mentioned. The chlorophyll in the grass was even thought by some to contribute to the whitening process, though it was mostly the sun doing the heavy lifting. A mainstream historical fact: large households, monasteries, and castles often had dedicated laundry staff and more organised drying arrangements. They might have indoor spaces, perhaps near the kitchens, or in a purpose-built laundry building, with lines strung up, or large wooden racks, sometimes called clothes horses, a term still in use, where clothes could be hung to dry, especially in inclement weather. These were, however, luxuries not available to the average villager or town dweller. For most people, outdoor drying was the norm, making wash day a highly weather-dependent operation. And that's the big unknown: the weather. You could have started your wash day under a clear blue sky, only to have clouds gather and the heavens open just as you're laying out your beautifully rinsed laundry. Rain was the enemy. A sudden downpour meant a frantic scramble to gather everything up before it got soaked all over again, undoing hours of work and necessitating at least some re-rinsing and re-wringing. It's a uniquely frustrating experience, one that modern dryer users rarely have to contemplate. Imagine the sigh of despair as you see those first ominous raindrops. Oh forsooth and botheration, or perhaps something a bit more colourful under your breath. Even if the weather held, there were other dangers. Wind, while helpful for drying, could also be a menace if it was too strong. Your precious shift, carefully draped over a hawthorn bush, could be whisked away and end up in the next parish, or worse, in a muddy puddle. You'd have to weigh your clothes down with stones sometimes, or secure them as best you could. Then there was the ever-present threat of animals. Chickens pecking at threads, dogs rolling on your clean linen, pigs, well, pigs being pigs. You had to be vigilant. And then there was the human element. Theft. Clothes were valuable. Textiles represented a huge investment of time and resources, from growing the flax or raising the sheep, to spinning the thread, weaving the cloth, and sewing the garment. A clean, well-made tunic or shift was a desirable item, and not everyone in medieval society was above a bit of opportunistic pilfering from an unguarded drying line or bush. One quirky tidbit: some medieval court records mention cases of clothing theft, indicating it was a recognised problem. Losing your freshly laundered shirt to a thief would be a truly galling experience, adding insult to the injury of all that hard work. So, you wouldn't just leave your laundry unattended for hours on end if you could help it. Someone, often a child or an older member of the household, might be tasked with keeping an eye on the drying clothes, a medieval laundry guard. Historians still argue about how medieval people managed laundry during long periods of bad weather, especially in winter in northern climates. Did they just wear their clothes for longer and longer, accepting a certain level of grime and dampness? Did they try to dry things indoors, near the hearth, risking smoky smells and the danger of fire, and filling their small, already crowded living spaces with damp fabric? It was likely a combination of all these strategies. You'd make the best of any brief dry spell, perhaps only washing the most essential items, and accepting that true bone-dry freshness was a seasonal luxury. The smell of damp wool must have been a very familiar winter aroma in many medieval homes. It's a far cry from pulling warm, fluffy towels straight from the dryer on a cold day. So, you watch your clothes flapping gently in the breeze, or lying patiently on the grass, the sun working its slow magic. You turn them periodically to ensure even drying. You sniff them, discreetly, of course, to check for that elusive scent of medieval freshness, which is probably more like the absence of foul odour combined with the faint, clean smell of sun-baked linen or wool. It's a waiting game, a period of cautious optimism. You've done your part, now it's up to nature, and a bit of luck, to finish the job. The sight of your clothes, finally dry, or at least dry enough to bring indoors, would be a welcome one indeed. Each dry garment represents a small victory against the pervasive dirt and damp of the medieval world. But the laundry cycle isn't quite over yet. There's still the matter of making these clean, dry, but probably rather wrinkled and stiff garments presentable. The medieval iron, or lack thereof, awaits. Your clothes are finally, blessedly dry. They've survived the lye, the beating, the river, the sun, the wind, and the potential threats of rain, thieving magpies, both avian and human, and overly curious goats. You gather them up, probably a bit stiff from being air-dried, and perhaps smelling faintly of sunshine, grass, or whatever bush they were draped over. But your work isn't quite done. If you want your garments to look neat and presentable, rather than like a crumpled map of your drying hedge, you need to address the wrinkles. And if you're a person of even modest standing, or if you're dealing with finer garments, you might also be concerned with pleats and deliberate creases. Welcome to the world of medieval pressing and pleating, a process accomplished without the benefit of a thermostat-controlled electric iron. For many everyday linen items, like basic shifts or under tunics, a good, vigorous shake and careful folding might have been deemed sufficient. Linen, especially when it's been through a lye wash and sun-bleached, can be quite crisp when dry, and some level of creasing was probably just accepted as normal for workaday garments. However, for outer garments, for finer linens, or for woolens that you wanted to look their best, some form of smoothing or pressing was desirable. One of the primary tools for this was the linen press. This was typically a large, sturdy wooden contraption, often a screw press, similar in principle to a wine press or a printing press, though the latter came later in the medieval period. You would carefully fold your clean, dry, or sometimes slightly damp, as this could help set the smoothness, linens, and place them between wooden boards within the press. Then you'd tighten the screw, applying immense pressure to the stack of fabric. The linens would be left under pressure for a considerable time, sometimes overnight, or even for a couple of days. When removed, they would be smooth, flat, and have sharp, neat creases where they were folded. This method was particularly effective for large flat items like tablecloths, napkins, for the wealthy who used such things, and bed linens, as well as for folded garments like shirts or tunics. A mainstream historical fact: Linen presses were common pieces of equipment in larger households, monasteries, and institutions that had a significant amount of linen to care for. The quality of your pressed linen was another subtle indicator of a well-run and prosperous household. For smaller items, or if you didn't have access to a large screw press, simpler methods were used. Smooth, heavy stones, sometimes heated, could be used as makeshift irons. You'd place the garment on a flat, firm surface, a smooth wooden table or board, and rub the heated stone over it. Glass smoothers, also known as slicks or slickstones, were another common tool. These were typically fist-sized, rounded pieces of dark glass, often black or very dark green, polished smooth. They would be heated, carefully, so as not to crack them, by the fire and then rubbed vigorously over the fabric to smooth out wrinkles. It was a slow, laborious process, requiring skill to apply the right amount of pressure and heat without scorching or damaging the fabric. Imagine trying to iron an entire tunic with a palm-sized piece of hot glass. Your wrist would get quite a workout, and you'd need to reheat your slickstone frequently. It makes our modern steam irons seem like marvels of effortless technology. Another method, particularly for achieving a high sheen on linen, involved a combination of starching and calendaring. Starch, made from wheat flour or other grains, could be applied to the linen to give it stiffness and body. After starching and drying, the fabric might be calendared. Calendaring involved passing the fabric between heavy rollers under pressure or rubbing it with a smooth, heavy object, like a polished stone or a specialized calendaring tool, to give it a smooth, glossy surface. This was more common for fine linens intended for display, like altar cloths or high-status table linen. The resulting sheen was highly prized. Pleating was also a significant feature of medieval fashion, especially from the High Middle Ages onwards. Tunics, kirtles, gowns, and sleeves often featured intricate, carefully set pleats which added volume, texture, and elegance to the garment. Creating and maintaining these pleats was a specialized skill. Sometimes, pleats were simply pressed into place using methods similar to those described above. For more permanent or sharply defined pleats, they might be sewn in, or the fabric might be treated with a sizing agent, like starch or a weak gum solution, and then carefully folded and pressed, often with heated implements, to set the pleats. Some historians still argue about the exact methods used to achieve the very fine, regular organ pleats, or goffering, seen in some medieval art and surviving textile fragments. Were they achieved with specialized heated tools, or through incredibly meticulous hand-folding and pressing techniques? One quirky tidbit. Some sources suggest that whalebone, baleen, strips, being flexible yet firm, were sometimes used as stiffeners or to help maintain the shape of certain garments or headdresses, and perhaps even to aid in creating or maintaining pleats or smooth lines. While not a direct pressing tool, it speaks to the desire for structured, well-defined garments. Imagine trying to iron around a whalebone insert. For woolen garments, the approach to smoothing was generally gentler than for linen. Wool is more sensitive to heat and pressure. Often, simply hanging a woolen garment carefully after it was dry, or folding it neatly and placing it under a weight, like a mattress, a common trick that has persisted through the ages, was enough to remove most wrinkles. If more pressing was needed, it would be done cautiously, perhaps with a slightly damp cloth placed between the wool and the heated stone or slickstone to prevent scorching or glazing the fabric. The overall aim was to achieve a look of neatness and order. A well-pressed garment, with crisp folds or elegant pleats, spoke of care, attention to detail, and a certain level of social standing. It was part of presenting oneself appropriately to the world. Wrinkled, unkempt clothing might signify slovenliness, poverty, or a lack of respect for oneself and others. So, this final stage of pressing and pleating, while perhaps less physically grueling than the washing itself, was an important part of the laundry cycle. It was the finishing touch, transforming the merely clean garment into something truly presentable. You, the medieval launderer, now with your stack of neatly pressed linens and carefully smoothed woolens, can finally feel a sense of accomplishment. The battle against dirt, grime, and wrinkles has been won, at least for this batch of laundry. The clothes are ready to be stored away, perhaps in a wooden chest, possibly with some sweet-smelling herbs like lavender or woodruff to keep them fresh and deter moths until they are needed. It's a long, arduous journey from a pile of filthy rags to a stack of pristine, by medieval standards, garments, and every step has required your skill, strength, and patience. The simple act of putting on a clean pressed shirt would have felt like a genuine luxury, a tangible reward for a huge amount of unseen labour. And now, as you carefully put these items away, you might just allow yourself a small, weary smile of satisfaction. Though, in the back of your mind, you know the laundry pile will start accumulating again all too soon. The work is never truly done. Throughout this entire epic journey, from hauling water to pressing pleats, there's one figure who is central to the whole operation, the washerwoman. Whether she's a member of the household doing the family laundry, which was overwhelmingly the case for most people, a hired servant in a wealthier establishment, or a professional lavender taking in washing for a fee, this is predominantly women's work. And it is relentless, physically demanding and often undervalued work, despite its absolute necessity for health, hygiene and social respectability. Let's take a moment to really appreciate the sheer grit and endurance of these medieval washerwomen. Imagine her day. It starts before dawn with the back-breaking task of hauling water, bucket after heavy bucket. Her hands are rough, chapped, and often sore from the friction of ropes, wooden handles, and the harsh cleaning agents she uses. Her back aches from bending over tubs, from lifting heavy, sodden cloth, from the repetitive motions of scrubbing and beating. She's exposed to the elements, the biting cold of river water in winter, the scorching sun in summer while clothes dry, the damp chill that can seep into your bones. If she's using lye, she's constantly at risk of chemical burns. If she's dealing with stale urine, she's enduring an aroma that would make most of us gag. There are no ergonomic tools, no labour-saving devices, just her own strength and stamina. For the woman doing her own family's laundry, this is just one part of her endless round of domestic duties. She also has to cook, clean the dwelling, as much as a medieval dwelling could be cleaned, care for children, perhaps tend a small garden, spin thread, mend clothes, and maybe even help with agricultural work or a family craft. Laundry day isn't a day off from these other tasks. It's squeezed in amongst them, or it becomes an all-consuming marathon that leaves her utterly exhausted. There's no sick pay, no vacation days from being the household washerwoman. The laundry pile is a constant, silent reproach, always growing, always demanding attention. In wealthier households, the laundry might be the responsibility of dedicated female servants. While this might spare the lady of the house the direct physical labour, it doesn't diminish the work itself. These servants would toil for long hours in often rudimentary laundry facilities, perhaps a damp outbuilding or a designated area in the scullery. Their wages would likely be meagre, their status low. Yet, the cleanliness and presentability of the entire household, from the lord's finest tunic to the kitchen boy's apron, rested on their weary shoulders. A mainstream historical fact, records from large medieval estates and monastic orders often list payments for soap, ashes, for lye, or for the services of professional washerwomen, indicating that laundry was a significant and recognised expense, and therefore a significant undertaking. Professional washerwomen, or lavenders, from the French lavandière, often congregated at communal washing places, like the riverbanks or public lavoirs. They would take in laundry from individuals or households who could afford to pay for the service, perhaps wealthier townsfolk, clergy, or nobles. This was a way for women, particularly widows, or those without other means of support, to earn a living. It was incredibly hard work, but it offered a degree of independence. These women would be experts in their craft, knowing all the tricks for stain removal, the best ways to handle different fabrics, and how to get the maximum cleanliness with the available resources. They were the unsung professionals of the medieval cleaning industry. Their hands would bear the telltale signs of their trade, reddened, calloused, perhaps with old scars from lye burns. The sheer physical strength required cannot be overstated, lifting huge bundles of wet linen, wielding a heavy laundry bat for hours, wringing out thick woolen cloaks. This was work that built muscle and endurance. Washerwomen were often depicted in art as robust, sometimes even formidable figures. They had to be. It was not a job for the delicate or the faint of heart. Think of it. The average load of wet laundry can weigh an astonishing amount. Now imagine processing multiple loads like that in a single day, using only manual methods. It's an Olympian feat of strength and stamina, performed daily, without medals or accolades. One quirky tidbit. In some medieval folklore and literature, washerwomen at fords or riverbanks, like the Celtic Bean Nig, were sometimes portrayed as supernatural figures, omens of death, washing the shrouds of those about to die. This perhaps reflects the somewhat liminal, otherworldly nature of their work, dealing with the cast-off skins of humanity, working at the water's edge, a boundary between worlds, often at odd hours. It also imbues their mundane, laborious task with a certain mystique and power, a recognition of their role in a fundamental cycle of life, death, and renewal, of clothing, at least. It's a far cry from just being the laundry lady. It's being a minor deity of the riverbank, presiding over transformations. Historians still argue about the degree of social stigma, if any, attached to the work of professional washerwomen. While the work was essential, it involved handling other people's dirty linen, literally, which could be seen as ritually or socially unclean in some contexts. However, it was also a recognised and necessary trade. The communal nature of washing at riversides might also have fostered a strong sense of solidarity and community among these women, creating their own social hierarchies and networks. They were privy to a lot of information, as we'll see when we discuss gossip. The knowledge these women possessed was immense. It wasn't written down in textbooks, it was passed from mother to daughter, from experienced washerwoman to novice. They were practical chemists, textile experts, and masters of logistics. They knew which ashes made the strongest lye, how long to soak different fabrics, which herbs repelled moths, how to coax a stubborn stain from a delicate piece of silk, if they ever encountered such a thing, and how to predict the weather well enough to get a load dry. This was skilled labour, requiring intelligence, judgment, and a vast store of empirical knowledge. To dismiss it as mere drudgery is to misunderstand the complexity and skill involved in medieval domestic work. So, as you picture this medieval laundry process, try to see it through the eyes of the woman doing the work. Feel the ache in her back, the sting of lye on her chapped hands, the chill of the river water, the weariness in her bones. But also, perhaps, a sense of pride in her skill, in her ability to transform filthy rags into clean, fresh garments, to bring order and cleanliness to her household, or to earn her living through sheer, hard graft. She is the often invisible engine driving this whole process. Without her, the medieval world would have been a much grubbier, smellier, and probably less healthy place. She deserves a moment of profound respect, this weary washerwoman, a true unsung hero of her time. Her strength and resilience are woven into the very fabric of medieval life. Every clean coif, every presentable tunic is a testament to her unending, thankless toil. Now, let's zoom in on one of the most fascinating and perhaps surprisingly vital aspects of medieval laundry day, especially when it happened at those communal washing spots by the river or at the village lavoir, the gossip. While their hands were busy scrubbing, beating and rinsing, their mouths were often just as active. The communal wash place wasn't just a practical necessity for getting clothes clean. It was a crucial hub of social interaction, a place where news was exchanged, opinions were aired, reputations were made or broken, and the intricate social fabric of the community was woven and rewoven with every shared confidence and whispered rumour. It was the medieval equivalent of the village Facebook group, the office water cooler, and the local newspaper, all rolled into one, with the added soundtrack of thwacking laundry bats and sloshing water. Imagine the scene. A group of women, and it was almost exclusively women, gathered at the riverbank. They're kneeling on hard stones or rough wooden planks, their skirts perhaps tucked up, their arms plunged into cold water, or vigorously working a laundry bat. The physical labour is shared, and so is the conversation. In a world without mass media, without instant communication, word of mouth was king, and the wash place was one of its principal thrones. What kind of information was flowing along with the river water? Everything. Absolutely everything. Local news, of course, was prime currency. Who was sick? Who had recovered? Were there any births, deaths, or marriages imminent or recent? Had anyone new arrived in the village, or had someone left? What was the latest decree from the local lord or the parish priest? These were the headlines of the day, passed from one washerwoman to another, discussed, dissected, and often embellished in the telling. Did you hear about Agnes, down by the mill? Her youngest has the sweating sickness, they say. Or, Old Man Hemlock finally passed in the night. His nephew from the next village will inherit the pig, I reckon. This was vital information for navigating village life. Then there was the more personal and often juicier stuff, the gossip. Who was courting whom? Were there any illicit liaisons suspected? Had young Thomas been caught scrumping apples from the Lord's orchard again? Was Mistress Ilara putting on airs since her husband made a good sale at the market? The private lives of neighbours were often public knowledge, or at least public speculation, at the washing stones. A raised eyebrow, a knowing glance, a lowered voice. These were the signals that a particularly spicy morsel of gossip was about to be shared. They say young Isabel was seen walking out with the new apprentice blacksmith again last night, and her father none the wiser. This wasn't just idle chatter. It was part of the way social norms were reinforced, and transgressions were noted and policed by the community, particularly by its female members. A mainstream historical fact, women's social networks, often built around shared tasks like laundry, childcare, or market activities, were incredibly important for the dissemination of information and the maintenance of social cohesion, or, sometimes, social conflict, within medieval communities. The wash place could also be a forum for complaints and commiserations. Are the miller's prices too high again? Is the reeve being overly officious in collecting taxes? Did your husband come home from the alehouse late and covered in mud for the third time this week? Sharing these grievances with other women who understood your burdens could be a source of comfort and solidarity. It was a space where frustrations could be vented, and perhaps where collective opinions could be formed. That new tithe on chickens is a disgrace, isn't it? How are we supposed to feed our families? Practical advice was also exchanged. Which herbs were best for a colicky baby? How do you get a stubborn rust stain out of linen? A topic we've already covered, but you can bet they were discussing their own tips and tricks. Where was the best place to forage for firewood or berries? This shared knowledge was essential for household management and survival. The wash place was a living library of domestic wisdom, passed on through conversation and demonstration. One quirky tidbit. Sometimes, the dirt being aired at the laundry wasn't just on the clothes. Disputes between neighbours might be thrashed out, quite literally, over the washing stones. Or, more subtly, a woman might make a pointed remark about someone else's poorly washed or mended clothes, a coded criticism of their housekeeping skills or social standing. The laundry itself could become a text, read and interpreted by the assembled company. Look at the state of her linens, and she calls herself a good wife. Ouch. The The soap suds weren't the only things that could be sharp. Historians still argue about the extent to which these female-dominated spaces, like the wash place, offered women a degree of autonomy or power within the largely patriarchal structure of medieval society. While they might not have had formal political power, their control over information, their ability to shape reputations, and their collective voice on community matters could be a significant informal influence. The gossip network could be a powerful tool for social control, for shaming those who transgressed communal norms, or for supporting those in need. It was a sub-rosa power structure, operating alongside, and sometimes in opposition to, the more visible male hierarchies. Of course, not all the talk was serious. There would have been laughter, jokes, songs, and stories. Wash day, despite its drudgery, could also be a time for camaraderie and a break from the isolation of individual households. The shared labour and the lively conversation helped to pass the long, arduous hours. Friendships were forged, alliances made, and a sense of community was reinforced. You learned who you could trust, who was a reliable source of news, who always had a sympathetic ear, and who was, perhaps, a malicious gossip to be wary of. The information gathered at the wash place would then be carried back into individual homes and spread further. Husbands might be informed of the day's news, or at least the parts deemed suitable for their ears. Children would overhear snippets. In this way, the ripples of wash day talk spread throughout the entire village or town. It was an organic, grassroots communication network, incredibly efficient in its own way. So, when you picture those medieval washwomen, don't just see them as silent, toiling figures. See them as active participants in the life of their community, as chroniclers, commentators, and influencers. The riverbank was their stage, their newsroom, their social club. The rhythm of the laundry bat was the percussion to their symphony of shared stories and secrets. The clean clothes they produced were a visible outcome of their labour, but the invisible threads of connection and information they wove were just as vital to the health and functioning of medieval society. It truly was Laundry Day, with Lye and a very healthy, very necessary dose of gossip. It makes you wonder what tales your own washing machine would tell if it could talk. Probably that you really need to clean its filter. We've journeyed through the entire arduous process of medieval laundry, from the initial gathering of filthy garments to the final, satisfying press. We've seen the back-breaking labour, the ingenious and sometimes alarming use of chemical agents like lye and stale urine, the simple yet effective tools, and the surprising social importance of the communal wash place. Now, let's step back and consider the broader implications. What were the real consequences of these laundry practices, or the lack thereof, on medieval health, hygiene, and social life? How did the concept of cleanliness itself, so different from our modern understanding, shape their world? Firstly, health and hygiene. In an era before germ theory, the connection between cleanliness and disease was understood in a more general, miasmatic way. Foul smells and visible dirt were associated with illness, and rightly so, even if the precise mechanisms weren't known. Regular washing of clothing, especially underlinens that were in direct contact with the skin, would undoubtedly have played a role in reducing the burden of skin diseases, infections, and parasites like lice and fleas. Remember those linen shifts and smocks, designed to be laundered more frequently and vigorously than outer woolens? They were a crucial sanitary barrier. The lye used in washing, being a strong alkali, would have had a significant disinfectant effect, killing many bacteria, viruses, and parasite eggs. Even the sun-drying process contributed, with UV radiation acting as a natural sterilizer. So, while medieval laundry was incredibly laborious, it was a vital public health measure, however imperfectly understood. A mainstream historical fact. periods of plague and other epidemics often saw renewed emphasis on cleanliness, with authorities sometimes issuing edicts about street cleaning and waste disposal, recognizing, at some level, the link between filth and disease. However, the limitations were also significant. Washing was infrequent for many, especially for outer garments or for poorer people who might only own 1 or 2 sets of clothes. Water sources were often contaminated. The very process of washing in a communal river could, paradoxically, spread contaminants if someone upstream was ill. And while lye was a powerful disinfectant, it was also harsh, and constant exposure could lead to skin problems for the washerwomen themselves. Furthermore, the general sanitary environment, unpaved streets, open sewers, if any, close proximity to animals, meant that staying truly clean was an uphill battle. Your freshly laundered tunic might be soiled again within hours of putting it on. It was a constant war of attrition against dirt. The social implications of cleanliness, or the perceived lack thereof, were huge. As we've touched upon, the state of one's clothing was a powerful visual cue, an instant indicator of social status, wealth, and even moral character. Pristine white linens, elaborately pleated gowns, and clothes free of obvious stains and smells signified not just access to resources, fine fabrics, dyes, servants, ample lye and soap, but also a certain level of order, discipline, and self-respect. Conversely, visibly dirty, tattered, or foul-smelling clothes could mark someone as poor, slovenly, or even morally suspect. Think of the stereotypical image of the unwashed masses. There's a deep-seated social judgment embedded in that phrase. This meant that people went to considerable effort within their means to present a clean appearance, at least for public occasions or when interacting with social superiors. Even if your everyday work clothes were inevitably grubby, you might have a Sunday best outfit that was kept cleaner and reserved for special occasions. The pressure to conform to certain standards of cleanliness, however rudimentary by our lights, was very real. It affected how people were treated, their opportunities, and their sense of self-worth. Historians still argue about the nuances of how these standards varied across different social classes and regions, and how they changed over the centuries of the medieval period. Was there a general trend towards increasing expectations of cleanliness, or did it fluctuate with economic conditions and cultural influences? The effort involved in laundry also had economic consequences. Time spent on laundry was time not spent on other productive activities. For a peasant woman, a full day devoted to washing was a day not spent in the fields, or spinning, or tending livestock. This opportunity cost was significant. For wealthier households, paying for servants or professional washerwomen, and for the necessary supplies like lye, soap, and fuel, was a regular household expense. The laundry bill was a real thing, even in the Middle Ages. Consider also the psychological impact. Living in a world where true, deep cleanliness was so hard to achieve and maintain must have shaped people's sensory experiences and their expectations. Smells that we would find overpowering were likely commonplace. A level of grime that would send us scurrying for the shower was simply part of everyday life. This isn't to say they liked it, but their tolerance levels were undoubtedly different. The occasional experience of wearing truly clean, freshly laundered clothes, perhaps scented with herbs, must have been a profound sensory pleasure, a rare treat for many. It's like that feeling of slipping into fresh sheets, but amplified 100-fold because the alternative was so much earthier. One quirky tidbit. The symbolic meaning of white linen was particularly potent. It was associated with purity, innocence, and spiritual cleanliness. Think of christening gowns, clerical vestments, or the white garments worn by knights during certain chivalric rituals. The ability to produce and maintain brilliant white linen through laborious lye washing and sun bleaching was therefore not just a practical skill, but also carried significant cultural and religious resonance. It was a visual representation of aspiration towards purity in a very impure world. The whiter the linen, the closer to godliness, perhaps. The communal nature of wash day, as we saw with the gossip, also had profound consequences for social cohesion and the formation of female networks. These shared labour experiences forged bonds, transmitted cultural knowledge, and provided a space for women to exercise a degree of agency and influence within their communities. The riverbank wasn't just where clothes got clean, it was where community was built and maintained, one shared story and one rinsed tunic at a time. It was a fundamental part of the social infrastructure. So, medieval laundry wasn't just a chore, it was a complex interplay of chemistry, physics, biology, economics, social dynamics, and cultural values. The methods they used, born of necessity and ingenuity, had far-reaching consequences for their health, their social interactions, and their understanding of the world. It makes you appreciate the incredible privilege of our modern laundry conveniences, not just for the time and effort they save us, but for the profound impact they have on our health, our comfort, and our ability to navigate the social world with relative ease. The next time you casually toss a load into your washing machine, spare a thought for your medieval counterpart, up to her elbows in lye water, wrestling with a heavy woolen cloak, and dreaming of a world where clean wasn't quite such a hard-won victory. The echoes of her labour are still there, in our own deeply ingrained desire for fresh, clean clothes, a desire she understood all too well, even if her means of achieving it were a world away from our own. And so, as the last of your freshly laundered, pressed, and perhaps even subtly herb-scented medieval garments are carefully folded and put away in a wooden chest, a weary sense of satisfaction settles over you. The long, arduous battle against the grime and odours of medieval life has, for now, been won. Your hands are raw, your back aches, and you're probably bone-tired, but your small corner of the world feels a little cleaner, a little more orderly. This journey through the medieval laundry process, from the initial daunting pile of filth to the neatly stacked evidence of your labour, reveals so much more than just how clothes were washed. It shows us a world of incredible resilience, resourcefulness, and a deep-seated human desire for cleanliness and order, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Reflect for a moment on the sheer physical and mental energy expended. The hauling of countless buckets of water, the careful preparation of caustic lye from wood ashes, the brutal soaking and bucking of linens, the rhythmic, exhausting beating with heavy wooden bats, the meticulous scrubbing, the inventive and sometimes stomach-churning methods for tackling stubborn stains, the chilling, endless rinsing in river water, the anxious vigil over drying clothes, and the final, careful pressing with heated stones or slickers. Each step was a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance. There were no shortcuts, no magic buttons to press. Every clean garment was a hard-won trophy. Consider the knowledge that was required. This wasn't unskilled labour, though it was often unpaid or poorly paid. It was a craft, passed down through generations, mostly among women. Knowing which woods produced the best ash for lye, judging the strength of the lye solution by feel or by an egg floating just so, understanding the different properties of wool and linen and how they reacted to various treatments, memorising an encyclopedia of stain removal law for everything from blood to wine to ink, reading the weather to choose the best drying day. This was a complex body of practical science, learned through observation, experience, and shared wisdom. The medieval washerwoman was a chemist, a physicist, a meteorologist, and a textile expert, all rolled into one. A mainstream historical fact to underscore this. Guilds and trades had their mysteries, or secret knowledge, and while domestic laundry wasn't formalised in the same way, the accumulated wisdom of generations of washerwomen constituted its own powerful, unwritten mystery of the craft. Think too about the way this process was embedded in the natural world. The rhythm of laundry was often dictated by the seasons, the weather, the availability of water, and the cycles of plant life, for soapwort or herbs. Wood ashes from the hearth, water from the river, sunlight and wind for drying, these were all essential natural components. There was an intimacy with the elements, a direct reliance on them, that we have largely lost in our climate-controlled, technologically mediated lives. This connection also meant a vulnerability to those same elements. A sudden rainstorm could undo hours of work. A harsh winter could make thorough washing nearly impossible. The social dimension, particularly the communal washing, and the associated gossip network, highlights how even the most mundane of chores can be a vital thread in the social fabric. The riverbank, or village lavoir, was more than just a utility space. It was a centre of communication, a place for solidarity, a forum for navigating the complexities of community life. The shared labour, the exchanged news, the collective sigh over a particularly stubborn stain or a difficult husband, these moments built connections and reinforced social bonds in a way that our solitary, automated laundry routines rarely do. It makes you wonder what we've lost, as well as gained, with the advent of the private washing machine. Perhaps we've traded a bit of community for a lot of convenience. One final quirky tidbit for our journey. Imagine the sheer sensory relief of putting on truly clean clothes in that era. When your baseline normal might involve a certain level of scratchiness, stiffness from accumulated grime, and a personal aroma that was, shall we say, robustly organic, the feel and smell of freshly lye-washed, sun-dried, and perhaps lavender-scented linen against your skin must have been a moment of pure, unadulterated luxury. A small personal victory against the ever-present medieval muck. It's a sensation we can barely imagine, because our dirty is so far removed from their dirty. Historians still argue about the overall trajectory of hygiene standards through the Middle Ages and into the early modern period. Was there a slow but steady improvement, or were there peaks and troughs influenced by factors like urbanization, plague, or changing cultural ideas about the body and cleanliness? What is clear is that the desire for cleanliness, however defined, was a constant, and the effort to achieve it was immense. The legacy of that effort is profound. It's in our continued association of cleanliness with health, order, and social acceptability. It's in the surprisingly ancient roots of some of our own laundry practices, like using cold water for bloodstains, or the principle of alkaline cleaners. And it's in our deep, almost primal satisfaction when we too conquer our own laundry piles, even if our battle is waged with push buttons and pleasantly scented pods rather than lye and laundry bats. The medieval washerwoman, with her aching back and her chapped hands, might look at our automated laundromats and washing machines with utter disbelief, perhaps even a touch of envy. But she might also recognise the fundamental human impulse behind it all. The enduring quest to bring a little bit of cleanliness, a little bit of order, a little bit of freshness into a world that is always, inevitably, tending towards dirt and decay. Her tools were different, her challenges were immense, but her goal was remarkably similar to our own. She was, in her own way, a pioneer of domestic science, a tireless warrior in the long, ongoing human struggle for a cleaner, more comfortable existence. And for that, she deserves our deepest respect, and perhaps, as you drift off to sleep, a moment of quiet thanks for the comforts she could only dream of, and which we so often take for granted. The sun has long set on her wash day. The river flows on, carrying away the last traces of lye and medieval grime. The village is quiet. And you, hopefully, are feeling that gentle pull towards slumber, your own modern bed a far cry from a medieval peasant's straw pallet. The world of medieval laundry, with its caustic lye and communal chatter, now begins to fade into the quiet shadows of your room. The rhythmic thwack of the laundry bat, the murmur of voices by the riverbank, the sharp tang of wood smoke and damp linen. These sounds and sensations recede, leaving behind a sense of profound appreciation for the immense labour that once defined even the simplest act of washing clothes. Imagine those hard-working hands now at rest, the day's toil finally done. The heavy, sodden fabrics are now in your mind's eye, light and dry, swaying gently in a forgotten breeze under a softer, more distant sun. Let the weariness you've vicariously experienced through this journey become a comfortable weight, easing you down into your own soft bed. The challenges of that distant era, the sheer, unyielding effort of daily life, can now serve as a gentle counterpoint to the peace of your present moment. The concerns of lie strength, of unpredictable weather, of aching muscles from hauling endless buckets of water are not yours to bear tonight. Instead, allow yourself to feel a sense of gratitude for the quiet hum of your own home, for the ease with which you can achieve cleanliness, for the simple comfort of fresh sheets that required no such Herculean effort. As the story of medieval laundry whispers its final sleepy goodnight, let any lingering thoughts of dirt and drudgery dissolve. Focus instead on the enduring human spirit, the resourcefulness, the quiet dignity of that everyday struggle. Let the gentle, persistent efforts of those distant lives become a soft, lulling rhythm, guiding you towards a deep and peaceful rest. There are no more stains to scrub, no more lye to leach, no more heavy, wet wool to wring out. There is only the quiet of the night, the comfort of your bed, and the gentle descent into dreams, where perhaps, just perhaps, the scent of sun-dried linen on a medieval meadow might still linger, a sweet and anachronistic perfume for your slumber.